UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's 28 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. on this beautiful, bright and sunny Monday morning, the 9th of March, 2026. A happy belated Women's Day to all the women that do support this channel, to those that are, frequent this channel, to you, Nalongo Nalukwago Annette, thank you so much. Brenda Nachinji, people like Isabella Martin, this is another one I'm forgetting her name. She used to join us from I think from the Philippines. But to all the women that support the Football Tribe UG channel, your love and support does not go unnoticed. So thank you so much, and a happy belated International Women's Day. Unfortunately for you, it fell on a Sunday, so you did not get the usual day off that you ordinarily would get, as it is recognized as an international public holiday. But it's a pleasure to be back here with you on this beautiful Monday morning to discuss once again the latest stuff from the world of football, from the world of sport. We'll be talking about a couple of things, including the Milan Derby, or the Derby della Madonnina there, that AC Milan won yesterday to complete the double. We'll talk about the FA Cup draws that are set for today, as well as the UEFA Champions League that is coming up next this week on the big menu. But before the UEFA Champions League gets underway, we'll have Monday Night Football, for which we'll have a game between West Ham United, I think, and Brentford for the final game of the 50th round of the FA Cup. The reason as to why the FA Cup is a crucial competition is that it is the oldest cup competition in as far as English football has lived. So, it does hold that importance. Then, over the weekend, Francesco Sola Fabregas did, I think, reach another milestone amounting to 100 points in the Italian Serie A, this being his second season in charge of Como, a team that he joined when they were still in the Italian Serie B, and now he guided them to promotion. Last season, I think they finished 10th on the standings of the Italian Serie A, and he's done tremendously well. As we speak, I think they should be in 5th place on the Italian Serie A standings, I think with about 10 games left to play. So he's done tremendously well. Francesco Sola Fabregas, the former Arsenal captain, ex-Barcelona and Chelsea midfielder, also did play for Monaco as well as Como before he retired to coach them. He's doing really, really well. He's one of those young managers or junior managers that are, being looked at or watched on by a chunk of teams. When we talk about young managers, there's this class of Cesc Fabregas, Xabi Alonso, Mikel Arteta. Those ones are, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard. They are all within the same bracket in there. So when you look at them, Xavi Hernandez, I think I don't know if Gary Neville and Paul Scholes qualify to be in the same bracket, because they both had their managerial stints at Valencia for Gary Neville, and Oldham for Paul Scholes, but that will be a shout for another. Then you have the sort of middle-aged managers, where you have the Jurgen Klopp, you have the likes of Mauricio Pochettino, Pep Guardiola, the sort of in that class, the Luis Enriquez of this world. And then you have, of course, those, I look at the seniors, the likes of Carlo Ancelotti, although I do not know very many that are of his age range that are still in charge, because over the years you've had many of them retire. The likes of Roy Hodgson, Jupp Heynckes at Bayern Munich, Vicente Del Bosque, and guys like that. So you have those different classes of managers. So in this sort of young class, even though Francesco Sola Fabregas is yet to win his first piece of silverware in his managerial career. He's one of those highly sought after managers in as far as European football is concerned. He's been looked at by a couple of teams even during the summer. We know that Inter Milan spoke to him about the Inter Milan wall following the departure of Simone Inzaghi. We know for a fact that he was low-key being sort of put in the conversation of Chelsea in the aftermath of the sacking of Enzo Maresca, but we knew that's going to be always a long shot and things like that. Now with we'll wait to see. We'll wait to see. Most recently, there's been speculation linking him with a potential move to Real Madrid, where that managerial role is vacant and currently preoccupied or occupied by Alvaro Arbeloa, who is there as an interim following the sacking of, Xabi Alonso. But I've previously told you that for me, it does feel far-fetched, a rumor and an idea because of, Cesc Fabregas's, history with Barcelona, where he grew up. So, because of that, we know a thing or two about that. So anyways, that's perhaps what is happening or what did transpire. So you do have something that is very, very incredible for Francesco Sola Fabregas there. Over the weekend, his side beat up against Cagliari, I think by 2-1. That was on Saturday. Before, hitting that milestone, I think currently they have about 51 points in as far as the Italian Serie A is concerned. I remember he was winning that game away from home. But Turina, as well as Da were his goal scorers on the day as they beat up against Cagliari, whose consolation was scored by Esposito. But that result put them in fourth place, actually, not even fifth place. They're in fourth place, ahead of Roma, with whom they are on level of 51 points, which is really, really tremendous. And then Napoli is only 5 points ahead of them with 10 games left to spare, while the top two are Inter Milan, who lost to AC Milan yesterday. Speaking of losing to AC Milan yesterday, it was the Milan Derby, also traditionally known as the Derby della Madonnina. Yes, traditionally we know we know how big a derby is. We know it's a feist one because the two sides share the same stadium. AC Milan call it San Siro. Inter Milan, I think, call it the Giuseppe Meazza Stadium. And beyond the naming rights or the names you've given to it, the stadium in itself is one that has caused a bit of controversy in Italian history in recent times, with the idea of having it demolished and rebuilt. Others say it's an iconic structure that should be retained as is. Just do refurbishments, and if you want to do a new stadium, go and look to do it entirely elsewhere. So there's a bit of a sentimental value in as far as Italian football is concerned with the San Siro. So and its history is rich enough. You have AC Milan, the second most successful club in European football, with 7 UEFA Champions League titles playing there. You do have Inter Milan in there. They have as many as I think 3 Champions League titles. I stand to be corrected on that fact, but at least their last coming in 2010, for which they played the final, their first final in 38 years, under the stewardship of Jose Mourinho at the time, who had knocked out Barcelona to cause quite the first year between manager Pep Guardiola and Jose Mourinho. But anyway, that's all besides the point. In regards to yesterday's game, we did watch a very, sort of, I can't say very entertaining game of football. It was more about it was indicative of a team that came one. Okay, I can't say that one came to win and the other came to lose. No, that wasn't the case. It would be an injustice on Inter Milan. It was a game. It was a game of missed chances. It was a game in which Inter Milan lacked that clinicalness. You could give a little bit of credit to Maynard for keeping some of the attempts out, but also it was a bit a 50-50, to be fair. I didn't think much separated the two sides, and the statistics will speak to that respect, because both sides had only 2 shots on target, and it was AC Milan that got one of theirs into the back of the net, and that's what counted. And that was through Pavis Estupinan. You remember he left Brighton and Hove Albion in the summer to join AC Milan, and he was scoring his first goal for AC Milan. And fortunately for him, it came in the Milan derby. So and then AC Milan had 6 shots of target, as well as Inter having 5. Possession, Inter Milan edged it to the tune of 63% compared to 37% of AC Milan. But again, it was a bit skewed. When you watch the game in itself, you did not see that over dominancy on the ball, perhaps because AC Milan were constantly breaking play. For those of you that were part of our conversation last night, it was a game that was on for the watch along, not a watch along as such, but at least we're following the game in real time, because we started our broadcast at around 11:50, and the game was just returning for the second half. So we were together for the remainder of the second half. So really, it was that case. When it came to the corner kicks, Inter had 6. AC Milan had 1, and you can see that despite the fact that Inter lost, they had put up a very, very good fight in the game. And to be fair, or to be honest to ourselves, I did not think that Inter deserved to lose. It's a kind of game that for which we would have been very happy if it had ended in a draw. Why? Because I felt like the two teams squared each other out. Really, there wasn't much to separate the two sides, in my humble opinion, really. So, but like I said, that meant that that AC Milan completed the double against their rivals, because the first leg also ended in a 1-0 victory for AC Milan. So it's a home and away victory for Maximiliano Allegri against Christian Chivu. And it was a very, very significant result for AC Milan because, one, it kept them within the title race. First of all, had they lost that game, it would have meant that they would have fallen 13 points behind their rivals, who are currently at the summit of the table. But also, if they had won, then the point difference would have remained at 10. So with AC Milan winning, it means they were able to reduce that deficit of 10 points to at least 7, going into the final 10 games of the season, for which anything can happen. Maybe the advantage or the blessing in disguise, I'm not sure it's an advantage but in a way, depending on how you slice it, is that Inter Milan got knocked out of the UEFA Champions League. So they do have the league to concentrate on. They do have, I think, the Coppa Italia, for which they will have another game later on. I think the return leg should be slated for next month when they play against Como in the reverse fixture of the Coppa Italia as a semi-final. Remember, the first leg ended in a goalless draw against Como, and I think the other fixture for the Coppa Italia semi-final is between Lazio and Atalanta. That first leg ended in a 2-2 draw. So then the two sides also met at the quarterfinals of the Coppa Italia, the semi-finals. But this was for last season, I think. Yes, last season, and Inter Milan got they got knocked out again because the first leg ended in a 1-1 draw, while AC Milan beat Inter in the reverse fixture by 3-0. And then when you go back to the Italian Super Cup back in the 2024-2025 season, again, AC Milan won that one by 3-2. So it's a fixture, albeit it's a derby. It's one that AC Milan, more often than not, tend to dominate, because if you want to find if you want to find a home and away kind of win for Inter Milan, you have to go back to the 2022-2023 UEFA Champions League semi-final, and we know that Inter Milan advanced to the finals of that one and then got beat by Man City by a goal to nil. So in between there, you'll find, I think, very few victories are really for Inter Milan, if any, because you'll have to really search for those. So it's a kind of fixture that, although it's a derby, it's a big one. We know that when it comes to pedigree or the history in magnitude of the club, you could say AC Milan is a notch ahead of Inter Milan and things like that. So they were happy to get away with that one. Luka Modric, 40 years of age, but he's still quite sublime on the ball. You really, really enjoy watching him. Rafael Leao was in there. The likes of Christian Pulisic, I thought he gave quite the performance on the night. Like I said, the goal came through Pavis Estupinan. He was the goal scorer on the day. That goal coming in the first half, in the 35th minute, with I think Joseph Fofana providing the assist. So you had like I said, Mike Maignan. He didn't have much to do, to be honest, but there's one moment, I think, one or two moments when he was called into action, and he rose again. He stood tall. Then yes, you have Adrian Rabiot, the French midfielder, was in there. Of course, I think he had a clash with somebody. I don't remember who exactly, but again, typical Italian football. They all play with the back three. Fikayo Tomori, Connie De Winter, and Strahinja Pavlovic in the back three for AC Milan, and then Rafael Leao played with Christian Pulisic as the sort of forward two, with that sort of congested midfield of three with wing backs and things like that. And then on the side of Inter Milan, again it was a back three: Manela Kanji, Yannick Pesic, and Sandro Bastoni, Jan Sommer in goal, Pietro Zielinski, Nico Barrera, Mkhitaryan in that midfield, Federico Di Marco, and Luis Enrique. Now, as much as I have no problem with Luis Enrique, but I sort of felt that this season, Inter really, really missed the services of Denzel Dumfries. I think he offers them a lot going forward than I'd say Luis Enrique offers them, in my humble opinion. But Esposito and Angie Boni were leading the lines because thingy, what's his name? Lautaro Martinez was an unused substitute. I could see the way he was dressed on the bench. He never looked like he was ever going to get on. He was literally there just like a fan, like any other. Maybe Hakane Chanalolu could have come on, but again, he did. Denzel Dumfries was brought on in the 59th minute, as well as Peter Sushik, things like that, and Fratesi, among others, but still they could not find the breakthrough. AC Milan defended really, really well whenever they needed to. Fikayo Tomori, for me, had a good performance and things like that. So in the end of it all, AC Milan won themselves a good game, but I thought overall it was a 50-50, should have ended in a draw. Kind of the way, I think if I were to draw a bit of comparisons, I would say Everton versus Manchester United. That game that Man United won by 0-0 when Benjamin Sesko scored that sort of goal. So in case you needed to draw examples, that's how I would relate it to. Anyways, allow us to move away from the Milan derby and get over to the other, news coming in. Now, there were some unsporting scenes in Brazilian football, in the Brazilian Serie A, where Cruzeiro beat up against what's the team? Atletico Mineiro by 0-0, I think. Now, you remember what I was commenting about just the other day when Real Madrid lost to Getafe by 0-0. What Antonio Rudiger did to Diego Rico. Now, it's exactly what really happened in the other game. I do not know specifics when it comes to the players, the actual players involved. But the Cruzeiro goalkeeper sort of catches the ball, and a running Atletico Mineiro striker oncoming sort of gets makes a bit of contact with him. But it never felt anything bad or dangerous. It was just the coming together of two players, one that is already on the ground and another that was, speeding into perhaps try and pass on what he figured could be a loose ball or that he could latch onto. And it never came off that way. And then when the goalkeeper sort of gets up and he has a go at him, ends up with both of his knees in his chest, and he scrapes him on the head. And of course, the other player is trying to sort of plead for his mercy, or try to show he's been fouled, and the goalkeeper tries to shut in his ears. And before you know it, a barrel broke out. It almost felt like a bar brawl, with players. There was actual kicking, players kicking one another. Fists were being literally exchanged. Guards had to come on, players from the bench rest on the pitch. You remember, Atletico Mineiro, the only player that I know that they do have is Hulk. For those of you that remember Hulk at FC Porto between 2008 and 2012, and then from there he left to Zenit St. Petersburg, where he was between 2012 and 2016. Then he went, I think, to Shanghai Port for that period of time, for about another 4 years or so, and now he's currently at Atletico Mineiro, really. So it was it looked ugly for football. It really looked ugly for football. In any case, it wasn't good at all. But I thought that is some news worth bringing to you. Then the other, again, unsporting events from the weekend were as Celtic knocked out, they knocked out Rangers from the Scottish Cup. They beat Rangers on post-match penalties. Now, again, fans invaded the pitch and things like that. The kind of scenes that you wouldn't want to see, really. And we all know about the sort of big history and rivalry that does exist between Rangers and Celtic, but because the game ended goalless in normal time. But man, those penalties from Rangers were quite poor. I think 2 of them were off target. Really, they just looked ugly. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, scoring his. So anyway, Celtic won it 4-2, but the scenes in the aftermath of in the post penalty shootout looked really ugly for football. You do not want fans invading the pitch and things like that, because they can cause harm to players, and players' safety is always at risk once such things happen on the match day. So I thought that in itself was another sort of a key moment from the weekend that was worth reviewing or revisiting. So we, I can only hope that we can do better. That even in the midst of our biggest of rivalries, that we can sort of find the space to, I don't know, to stomach a defeat against even the toughest of our opponents and things like that. Then the other quarterfinal, St. Mirren beat up against Patrick Thistle. Is Thistle? I hope that's how they pronounce it. By 2-1. So that's for the Scottish Cup. For the Scottish Cup quarterfinals, in as far as things were concerned. Then earlier on, Dumflane Athletic had beaten up against Aberdeen by 3-0. That was on Saturday, while on Friday, Dundee lost to Falkirk by 2-1. So that means you have a semi-final to play for those teams. So we'll wait and see. But the reason as to why I thought I should talk about the Scottish Cup, not because of what happened or didn't happen in normal time, but because of what transpired in the aftermath of those penalty shootouts. So that was unsporting, things. Then quickly, let's move on to the FA Cup. Now, yesterday we went through majority of the results. So perhaps, but for purposes of a recap, maybe we will go over some of them. Let me see if I can find my dashboard for the FA Cup, results. So, anyways, before I even find them, Leeds United beat up against Norwich City by 3-0. Port Vale stands Sunderland in a 1-0 victory. Southampton also edged Fulham, beating them by 0-0, a penalty that came in stoppage time. And then Man City swept away Newcastle. That was on Saturday, 3-1. Chelsea managed to overcome Wrexham in extra time, winning that game by 4-2. Dobson, I'm forgetting his name. Dobson getting a red card in that one for his high tackle on Alejandro Garnacho. Then Arsenal struggled, but still managed to get, to beat Mansfield Town by 2-1. When I say struggled, I don't mean that their performance was poor, but I mean to say the result or the victory was far from convincing than ordinarily you would have thought or you'd have loved it to be if you're an Arsenal fan in that sort of a sense. And then earlier on Friday, we know that Liverpool beat up against Wolverhampton Wanderers by 3-1. Lee Kang-in scoring there for the consolation for Wolverhampton Wanderers, while Andy Robertson, Mohamed Salah, and Curtis Jones were the goal scorers for that Liverpool side as they won that game by 3-1. So we do have 7 teams have already confirmed their places or their slots in the quarterfinals. Those are the 7 teams. And now, tonight, we'll wait for the result between West Ham and Brentford. Now, that game is going to come at 10:30 p.m. Now, by the time it kicks off, because 10:30 p.m. is East African time, by the time it kicks off, the draw for the quarterfinals will have been conducted because it's going to be conducted at 7:05 p.m. That's UK time. Ordinarily, that implies about 10:05 Ugandan time. So we'll be here tonight provided power is on. You never know with Uganda. You can never guarantee anything. But we'll be here to sort of bring you the results from the draw. And like I spoke to you yesterday, for those of you that were part of last night's broadcast, but for purposes of those that weren't, I will allow me repeat myself, that some of those teams will be praying and hoping that they do not get to face each other, especially if you're Man City, you wouldn't want to face Arsenal and vice versa. And then if you're Liverpool, perhaps you wouldn't want to face a Chelsea, or you wouldn't want to face an Arsenal, or or an Arsenal. So, in other words, you have the big four teams that are still in there: Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool. None of those teams would want to be facing each other because of the responsibilities that they still have in other competitions, particularly in the UEFA Champions League and in the Premier League. Whereas the Premier League title race is still down to Arsenal, Man City, the other two in Chelsea and Liverpool have a top 4 race to accomplish. So avoiding a big game at this stage of the season, where games are going to be coming thick and fast, depending on how further you go in other competitions, particularly in the UEFA Champions League and the FA Cup itself, you'd be hoping for a lesser opponent, given the kind of toll that it can take on your squad. I explained the context of Man City and Arsenal, because for Man City and Arsenal, they are still involved in 4 competitions, trying to win the quadruple. Whether any of the sides will go ahead to achieve that remains to be seen, or perhaps miraculously be waited for. Because no side, I think, in British football has done it before. Man City have done the treble twice, but at no one point have they won the quadruple. So, and Arsenal, they themselves have never done it. In fact, they've never won the treble, to the best of my knowledge. They've done the cup double on multiple occasions. I think you have to go back to 98 and then 2002. When they win the league and the FA Cup and things like that. Man City and Arsenal already have a date with each other in the finals of the EFL Cup. I think last season we did have a final between Newcastle and Liverpool. Oftentimes, you do get these kinds of things, and I've spoken to you before on how Man City beat up against Arsenal by 3-0 to win their first EFL Cup final under Pep Guardiola. That was in 2018. Vincent Kompany, Sergio Kun Aguero, and I think David Silva, the goal scorers in that fixture. So, because Man City and Arsenal already have each other in that cup final, then they have a reverse fixture between themselves in the league at the Etihad, in mid-April. They would, I believe you me, they wouldn't want to face each other. Arsenal wouldn't want to face Chelsea for the 5th time this season, having met them twice in the Premier League and then twice in the EFL Cup. I don't think they would want to meet Liverpool either, because this season they met twice. That was in the Premier League, and Arsenal have not beaten up against Liverpool at any one time. The first was the defeat at Anfield by 0-0, and the reverse fixture ended in a goalless draw. So really, if you're Arsenal, you want to avoid that. And the reverse is true, going around the other three teams in Liverpool, Man City and Chelsea. Then, of course, But nonetheless, given the sort of teams that are into the quarterfinals, there's a huge possibility that at least one of those will be facing the other. There's a huge possibility for that. But the other teams that have gone through in Southampton, in Port Vale, in Wrexham, not Wrexham, in Port Vale, Southampton, Leeds, and then of course tonight we'll wait to find out between West Ham and Brentford who goes through. Again, it's like I keep saying, if you're a Premier League team, you ideally would have wanted to avoid the Premier League team. But because there's as many as 6 Premier League teams left in the competition, because either Brentford or West Ham goes through, still a Premier League team, you only have 2 teams that are non-Premier League teams. So you cannot hope that every Premier League team gets a non-Premier League opponent. So best case scenario, for example, if I were to predict, and this is more wishful than objective in part. For example, if you're Arsenal, you play to maybe get a Port Vale or a Southampton. Not because Port Vale and Southampton is an easy, but Arsenal have already beaten up against Port Vale this season, I think in the Carabao Cup, so wouldn't hurt if they got them the second time. But if you're getting Port Vale or Southampton, it may be an easier breathing kind of, you take a breath of sigh of relief, as opposed to you getting a Man City or a Chelsea or a Liverpool, And if you're Man City and you get a Leeds United, it's not an easy fixture, but you'd be hoping for that. So again, Southampton have met Liverpool this season already. That was in the EFL Cup. So let's look at this. Let's say Arsenal get Port Vale, Liverpool get Southampton, Man City get Leeds, Chelsea get either of West Ham or Brentford, in an ideal world. And it wouldn't be too bad a draw if it went that way for those big teams looking at it in their perspective. Of course, somebody would say, oh, Chelsea have it hard, Man City have it hard if they have Leeds, because we know that, albeit they've already beaten Leeds home and away this season, it's not been a walkover, it's not been as straightforward as you would want to assume it would have been. So, guys, apologies for the background noise. There's a kid crying in the background. Apologies on that one. So it's beyond my control, so that's why I cannot mitigate it. So anyways, ideally, that's perhaps in part how those teams would want to go about the draw. Or in another case scenario, maybe if Arsenal got, let's say, Leeds and it's a home fixture for the Arsenal, because that's also key, because if you get the draw but you are away from home, that means traveling, and whereas it is within the same country, it does bring its own demands, when it comes to traveling away from home. So either way, or even if Arsenal get Leeds or they get a Southampton, you feel they will be sort of okay-ish with that one, because, and then when it gets to the semifinals, there it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you get when it comes to the semifinals, because the semifinals, first of all, are played at a neutral ground. That's Wembley Stadium, and you fancy yourself. If you want to go advance to the final, then trust me, you ought to, come up, you're bound to come against some of the big boys. But maybe you could also count on an upset being caused in the quarterfinals, because if, let's say, the big four in Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City were able to avoid each other altogether at the quarterfinals, it wouldn't be too surprising if you had a semi-final that has all those 4 teams. But an upset can be ruled out from the other smaller teams that are still in the competition. Then also, Man City would want to avoid Chelsea. Why? Because they have to play Chelsea in a couple of weeks' time. In fact, I think after their game against West Ham, the next game they play is supposed to be Chelsea. So you wouldn't want to play Chelsea, later this month, and then you have to play him early the subsequent month, whereas you are capable of beating up against them. Either way you split it, you do not want to meet a team one too many times across a season, because they may they may grow to learn your game, and they give you a bit of a headache. Getting to this stage, Man City beat up against Newcastle, and that was the fifth time Man City were meeting Newcastle in this season. Fortunately for Man City, they've been able to win 4 of those meetings, home and away in the EFL Cup and the FA Cup, of course, and once in the league, and then Newcastle won that one time. So it's not as straightforward. It's not a given that perhaps you'll be a Man City and get the advantage or do the number that Man City did on Newcastle. Anyways, let's move on. But those draws are on today for the FA Cup. For those of you that are interested in taking on the conversation on. So, like I said, we'll bring you the updates. Then quickly, let's move on to the UEFA Champions League. Speaking of the UEFA Champions League, now UEFA Champions League, the action does return tomorrow. That's on Tuesday. The early kickoff will come at 8:45 p.m. when Liverpool travel away to Galatasaray. These two sides met at the league stage, and Galatasaray beat Liverpool by 0-0. That goal scored by Victor Osimhen. Then Barcelona, following their 1-0 victory against Athletic Bilbao at San Mamés, they took a direct flight straight away to the UK, where to the city of Newcastle, where they will be playing Newcastle on Tuesday at 11 p.m. East African time. And like I keep saying, if ceteris paribus, all factors kept constant, our focus on Tuesday night will be on the Newcastle versus Barcelona game, as well as Atletico de Madrid versus Tottenham Hotspur game. We will, of course, keep in touch with Atlanta versus Bayern Munich. But for me, I feel that I don't want to call it a formality, because it is not. It's far from it. But you feel that the other two fixtures promise to be a bit more close than you'd expect Atlanta versus Bayern Munich, because I believe the quality is miles apart in that fixture, and the comfort that Bayern Munich have in the league, going into that game itself is quite relieving compared to the likes of Barcelona, because Barcelona cannot afford to be laxed because in the league they are only 4 points ahead of Real Madrid. When it comes to Atletico de Madrid and Tottenham Hotspurs, Atletico Madrid know they are not going to win the league title. So for them, it's all about finishing maybe third on that Spanish La Liga log. It's about waiting to play the Copa del Rey final, in which they will be up against Real Sociedad. I don't know when that will be played, and then Tottenham Hotspurs are fighting against relegation in the Premier League. So Igor Tudor, for where he's yet to prove himself in the Premier League, having lost his first 3 games, losing to Fulham, losing to Crystal Palace and Arsenal. Guys, apologies on that noise. Kids are playing with their toy outside there. Jesus Christ. I feel like getting up here to say, So anyways, it is what it is. So apologies on that background noise in case it is affecting you or in terms of your reception out there. Oftentimes when the kids are playing on the outside, there's not much I can do about that. So anyways, so with Igor Tudor having lost all his 3 games in charge of Tottenham Hotspurs, perhaps he gets an opportunity to prove himself in the UEFA Champions League. Whether he can pull that off, that remains to be seen, but that fixture will be played on Tuesday, the 10th of March. So then we'll have fixtures on Wednesday, of course. The early kickoff will come between Arsenal and Bayer Leverkusen. I've not taken note of this one, by the way, that Arsenal were going to be playing in the early kickoff. So that means, by the way, by the time we get to our 11 p.m. broadcast, we would have already watched that game. Yeah, it will have already been concluded. So big game for Arsenal, given what is happening with injuries in their camp. Martin Odegaard, Ben White, Mikel Merino, Ricardo Carafiori, who else? William Saliba. There's been quite a couple of them in that Arsenal dressing room. So they take on Bayer Leverkusen, who I think over the weekend, I stand to be corrected, but might have lost. Was it to Freiburg? Because they played a game on Saturday. No, they did not lose. It was a 3-all draw against Freiburg. Yes. But big game coming up for both sides in as far as the UEFA Champions League is concerned. So on Wednesday, in the early kickoff at 10:45 p.m., it will be Leverkusen against Arsenal, and then later on that night, PSG will be up against Chelsea, while Real Madrid will entertain Manchester City, and then Bodo Glimt will be up against Sporting CP or Sporting Lisbon. Of course, on Wednesday, our focus will be on PSG versus Chelsea, as well as Real Madrid, Manchester City. So those are the games that will form our primary focus. But again, as the case always is, we'll be sure that we'll be keeping tabs on both, on all the three fixtures that will be played at the same time. God willing, we shall have sufficient resources to at least keep our eyes peeled on all fixtures and see how it all goes down. So really, with that said, allow me digress a bit back to the FA Cup. And I do digress back a bit to the FA Cup, particularly to one game that I want to pick out, because the other game that I would have wanted to look at was the Man City Newcastle game, but Man City were too hot to handle for Newcastle, especially in the second half there, because the first half you could call it to say it was a little bit balanced attacking wise. But eventually Man City winning it 3-1, and yet it could have been even more. Aaron Ramsdale could have done better in that game. But I wanted to digress back particularly to the FA Cup for the game between Chelsea and Wrexham. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with the Wrexham story, Wrexham are a team from North Wales. And in 2021, they were bought by Hollywood stars in Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, something like that. Now, they bought Wrexham for £2 million. At the time, Wrexham had spent 15 years in the Nations League. That's the 5th tier division of English football. So when they buy the club, of course, they do all the right things. And, particularly personally, because I do not follow them that much, I do remember Ben Foster going to play for them. And then they earned their promotion from the Nations League in 2022, I think, to League 2. Then, when they earned their promotion from from Nations League to League 2 in 2022, in 2023, they get their promotion from League 2 to League 1. And then in 2024, they get their promotion from League 1 to the Championship. No, actually, that's 2025. And then 2024 is League 1, 2023 is League 2. So it's 2022 from the national division or national league. It's called the National League. So in other words, they've had 3 consecutive years of promotion from one division to another. That's currently they are playing in the Championship, where they sit 6th on the 24-team championship table, having played about 35 games. And I think they have about 56 points. So they have an impressive story. If they were to, let's say, earn promotion to the Premier League next season, it would make 4 consecutive promotions, which has never been earned by any team in the history of English football. So I find their story very interesting. Their manager is called Phil Parkinson. Now, like I said, it's a very interesting story. Present day, according to Bloomberg, the club is valued at about £350 million. And other sources say the club is valued at as high as £500 million. Now, one may disagree or agree with that, depending on how you look at it. But it's really been an interesting journey for them, particularly for Ryan Reynolds and the city of Wrexham and their fans. So in 2024, They beat Forest Green to earn their promotion from League Two to League One. And then in 2025, they beat Charlton Athletic to earn their promotion from League One to the Championship. Like I said, in 2023, they had earned their promotion from the Nations League. Sorry, from not Nations League. I don't know why I confuse it with the Nations League. From the National League to League Two. So for 3 consecutive years, they've been promoted from one lower tier division of English football to another. So it's a very, very incredible story. And for them to come up against Chelsea and play it out to a 2-all draw in normal time before forcing them into extra time, for which they went into extra time with the manless following the sending off of George Dobson for his red card for his high tackle on Garnacho. For me, this is all a very, very interesting story. And I said in the aftermath of that game that Wrexham will be really, really proud of the kind of performance that they put up on the day against the Chelsea side, a very big team with all their resources, of course. I mean, when it comes to resources, of course, you then also remember why I told you that Arsenal struggled against Mansfield Town, because when you look at the resources that these teams are dealing with, and that's the beauty about sport, that when you come and compete enough, it doesn't matter what the other has in terms of resources, because we've seen teams with a £10 million budgets go and outplay teams with hundreds of millions of pounds budgets. You remember Grimsby Town knocking out Manchester United at the 3rd round of the EFL Cup. You remember that, So, and Grimsby Town, I think, playing the 3rd tier. That's League One. Yes, I think League One of English football. So those kinds of stories remind you that sport can be a life equalizer. That whereas we live in a society that, or in a world that is not fair, or that is not evenly balanced between the haves and the have-nots, and then you have the mediocres in there. You every time you watch a story like this, it's always interesting. And for me, like I've already said, usually if it's not my team playing particularly, I'm always for the underdog. I'm always for the underdog. That's why I told you that I'd hoped for some upsets in the course of the weekend for the FA Cup, because the last thing I would have wanted for all Premier League teams to be in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. And that's why I'm really happy for Port Vale, for Southampton. I'm really, really happy for them. And I would have loved an upset for Chelsea. Not because Wrexham were up against Chelsea, particularly that I have anything against Chelsea, but because Wrexham were the underdog of the day. So really, that's how I would have loved to see it, in my humble opinion. And it's really, really a beautiful story what Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney have been able to do with this club that were literally on the verge of collapse prior to them buying it. A very old club, as old as you could have football really invented in terms of formulation of clubs, because the club was started in 1864. That was after the First World War. Was it after the First World War? Or pre-First World? I don't remember. I don't remember my history there. Okay. Bruhin. Oh. Who is back with us? Hello, man. What do you think about Max Dorman? In my opinion, he's so good. Now, Max Dorman is a very interesting character. In fact, thank you for taking us away from the Chelsea Wrexham story. Now, Max Dorman is a very, very interesting character and story. We're talking about a 16-year-old boy who he sort of burst onto the scene starting from the summer. That's when I first get to watch him. And he's really, really good. He's good. It's not very often that you see a player as young as he is being that confident on the ball. He gave the man of the match performance in Arsenal's 2-1 victory against Mansfield Town. And he played in that sort of 10 pockets role where Martin Odegaard or Ebeleche Eze Ordinary would play. And he looked good. He caused all sorts of troubles for Mansfield. He had, I think, about a couple of missed opportunities, chances in terms of scoring or getting his name on the score sheet. But he was really, really brilliant. He was really, really brilliant. And for me, I understand. I don't know why. But sometimes I would want to see teams risk it. I want to see big teams take a chance on these young boys, not by sending them out on loan, but I want to see them being given an opportunity. You know, you say Lamine Yamal has ruined us. He makes us believe being good at 16 is normal, which makes us appreciate others like Dorman. Now, for me, here's how I look at it. Every once in a while, you'll have a shooting star. I don't know if you believe in shooting stars. There's a cliche that when you see a shooting star, make your wish and it will come true. Trust me, I've made a couple of those. None of them ever came true. So maybe it's a cliche and a myth. But every once in a while, you'll have a shooting star. And by that, I mean, you'll have a talent that sort of comes and outshines the others. When you go to tennis, when you look at Naomi Osaka, when you look at the likes of Alcaraz, you'll sort of understand what I'm talking about. Over the years, in football, we've had these sparks of talent, these shooting stars, and a good number of them have not stood the test of time. In other words, they've not gone to live to the expectations. And in recent memory, I can highlight players like Ansu Fati at Barcelona. But when you look at Lamine Yamal, again, before we say we think he makes it look normal or it's abnormal for a 16-year-old to be the kind of things that he's doing, how many 16-year-olds that have come up playing football in his time that have not hit his levels or have not come out to the cream, to the top? There are quite a whole chunk of them, you know. So, in fact, it says that in every 1,000 players that go through the academy, apologies on the background noise, that start football, only 1% make it to, no, actually it's in every 100 players get a promotion to their first team. So for example, if you're playing in the Chelsea Academy, the Arsenal Academy, the Man United Academy, out of every 100 players, you get only one or two. You get only one getting promoted to the first team. So that really often tells you how hard or difficult it is to make it in football. And that's why when the whites are teaching football to these young children, they do not teach them just about football. They teach them about other things of life, because you may not make it in football as much as you love the sport. So you say English in the future have Rio Ngomoha of left winger from Liverpool and Max Dorman at both crazy talents. Now, again, so for me, it's all about standing the test of time and consistency. When you look at players like Curtis Jones, Elliot Anderson is doing okay, but Harvey Elliott, yes, and Curtis Jones. These were standout performers when I think England were winning Euros under 21. And look at them now. Look at Curtis Jones. He's far from sharp. I mean, when you look at top young talents across European football, he's not going to make it even in the top 5, let alone the top 10. I bet he would make it in the top 10. I think you'll go for players like Kenan Yildiz at Juventus. You'll go for Nico Paz at Como. You'll talk about Lamine Yamal. You'll talk about Pedri. You'll talk about, perhaps Mark Beno. Maybe not. Maybe Mark Beno is equally not up to beat there. But you'll go and pick a Bradley Bacola, a Desley Due, because they are equally young players within the same sort of age bracket or profile. So it's about standing the test of the test of time. And for the second season running, we've seen Lamine Yamal do it, and he's really stand out, because he even scored that only goal that won them the game against Athletic Bilbao over the weekend to sort of restore their 4-point cushion at the summit of the Spanish La Liga table. So when I watch Max Dorman play, I've only watched him a couple of games for as long as he's featured for the Arsenal, but he's such a brilliant player. And how I wish Mikel Arteta was bold enough to do what Xavi did with Lamine Yamal, to trust him. He may have not shined most under him, because he shone most last season under Hans Flick, but it was Xavi who brought him to the forefront. He's currently 18 years of age, but it was 2 years ago when Xavi brought him to the scene. So how I wish Mikel Arteta is bold enough to, bring this kid in some competitive games. It may not be all games, but for us to get to see him, Unfortunately for him, he had been out through injury for about coming on 3 months. And before featuring in the game against Mansfield Town, he had only returned from injury, trained a bit, and featured in an under 21 game. So really, he's such an interesting character for me. There's also a young kid that Man United fans are excited about. I forget the name. He's playing in the academy. Who are your top 3 players in the world this season only? Top 3 players in the world this season. Whoa, wow. That's a difficult question. I must acknowledge. That's a really, really difficult question. But let me see if I can come on to. I'd say Kylian Mbappe is in there. I would say top 3. I'd say Kylian Mbappe. I'd say Hurricane. And Lamine Yamal. But I'm torn between Hurricane and Luis Diaz. I'm torn between Hurricane and Luis Diaz. You see, you equally have the same, Yamal, Kane, and Mbappe. Because Luis Diaz, my oh my, what a season he's having. When you look at his numbers, when you look at Luis Diaz's numbers this season, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised what's been able to achieve with Bayern Munich. For example, in the German Bundesliga, he's played 24 games, he scored 14 goals and provided 10 assists. That's a 24-goal involvement in 24 games. When you go to the UEFA Champions League, he's played 6 games, 3 goals and 1 assist. In the DFB Pokal, he has 2 goals and 1 assist. In the DFL Super Cup, he had 1 goal. So in other words, across the entire campaign, he's played about 35 games. That is in Bayern Munich colors. He scored about, let me see, I'm trying to do the math in my head. That should be 6. He scored about 20 goals and he's provided 12 assists. So that's a 32-goal involvement in 35 games. That's impressive. That's impressive. Those numbers are almost as good as what Michael Olise had last season, if not better, you know. You say Olise has around 23 assists this season. I would put Olise over Diaz, but both have, I understand where you're coming from, but for me, Michael Olise is playing his second season with Bayern Munich, and he's equally scored 10 goals and provided 13 assists in as far as the German Bundesliga is concerned. And overall, he has about, let me see, 3 plus 2 is 5. He has about 18 assists across all competitions. And then he scored about 13 goals across all competitions. So for me, it's still Luis Diaz for me. He's been quite incredible. He's been quite incredible for that Bayern Munich side. As one of those who thought that Bayern Munich spending 70 million euros on the 27-year Colombian international, possibly now 28, was a bit of an overstretch. But no, actually he's 29. He was 28 at the time when they bought him. But he's hit those numbers. He's proved to be a worthy investment, really. So for me, Luis Diaz, is right up there. But I think Hurricane edges it because one would think that at his age, that he would be perhaps beginning to sort of slow a bit down. Okay, that too is not too old, but I mean, he already has 30 goals in the Bundesliga this season with 5 assists. That's just incredible. That's just incredible. In the UEFA Champions League, he scored 8 goals. So he has about what? Let's see, 12, 13. He has about a 43. He scored about 43 goals already this season for Bayern Munich. So he's been really, really impressive. Diaz shines at Bayern Munich because in the Bundesliga, many people attack, so he's very good at counter-attack. He's also good at teams in low blocks, and we play short on one wing, so Diaz is 1v1 with an opponent. I mean, for me, he started impressing me last season when he was at Liverpool. I thought he did really well, even because even for Liverpool last season he scored 13 goals, but that was in 35 appearances, 13 goals and 5 assists. That was an 18-goal involvement, the best of his numbers in Liverpool colours in as far as the Premier League was concerned. So even last season was an upgrade. So this season is just a step up, you know, to better performances. And I really, really appreciate that he stepped up, because sometimes players go to big teams and get intimidated, but he's gone there. He's at the right age, you'd argue. He's matured, and yeah. And yeah, he's been really, really good, in my opinion. Musiala is one of my favorite players. I really, really want to see him dribble more and get back to his best. Now, okay, I do not watch much of the German Bundesliga. I won't lie to you. In fact, not any, rarely. I think it was the other day. This season, I've only watched 2 games of the German Bundesliga. I watched a game between RB Leipzig and Borussia Dortmund, which ended in a 2-2 draw. Then I watched the Derby della Madonnina, that was which Bayern Munich beat up against Dortmund by 3-2. But when it comes to Jamal Musiala, he's one of those young talents that I really, really appreciate. I put him in the same realm of the Kenan Yildiz and Nico Paz of this world. And perhaps somewhere maybe Adagula, a kind of. But you must understand that he has to play with a bit of caution. Why? He's just had a bad rap with injuries, particularly going back to last season. We know he had missed about 3 months with an injury. Then he returns in time to feature in the FIFA Club World Cup. Then he features in one of those games in which Bayern Munich beat somebody with so many goals, and he scores. I think he had a hat-trick in that one. And then he gets injured in their game against PSG. Gianluigi Donnarumma breaking his ankle, and he had to go out for 3-4 months again through injury. So when you're a young player and you suffer back-to-back bad injuries, when you return, you're going to play with a bit of caution. It's a case of once bitten, twice shy. It's like when a kid gets burned, by something, they'll start to proceed cautiously, and next time, they won't be as free or at ease with everything that they want to touch. So if you feel he's sort of playing in a bit of a minute, way, or with a bit of a reservation and taking less risks, it comes from that. So I think he will eventually get back to his best. He's one of those players that the German national team would want to ride on. He's such a tremendous talent, Jamal Musiala. Yeah, he's one of those players that I've looked around and say, I wish he could play for my team, kind of thing, So, anyways, who? Allow me to call you who. He sounds Chinese. I'll keep saying. Thank you so much, Hu, for coming on, even though you joined the conversation a bit late. Thank you so much for having spared the time to join the conversation. You say he should play safe so that he's ready for the World Cup. Germany can't afford to miss him much. Indeed, and you're right about that, because let's be honest, German does not have so many standout stars going into the World Cup. They're really, really hoping that Musiala, Kai Havertz, what's his name? they can be really, really fit for the tournament to give them that bit of a push. So yeah, that's all they can hope for. So, anyways, allow me to wrap it up here. Unfortunately, you joined us a bit late, but next time perhaps better. But thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this morning broadcast. It's been 1 hour and about 5 minutes. So, thank you for your active participation. Those that were behind the scenes, Kamori, or in the ventilators, those. Yes, no problem, man. Thank you. So those that did like the broadcast, those that didn't, but joined us for whatever amount of time that we are able to join us for, you are much appreciated. Thank you for choosing to give us part of your time on these early mornings. We'll be back tonight at 11 p.m. to do more sports, to look forward to the Champions League. We'll look at that game between West Ham and Brentford. We'll give updates as the game goes on. It does kick off at 10:30 p.m. Then we'll do the FA Cup draws for the quarterfinals. We'll give a review of what the draws may have been, depending on how they go. So yeah, unless otherwise. Otherwise, have a blessed day. And I'll see you guys next time. Do not forget, this week is the week for the UEFA Champions League, so there's plenty to look forward to. So I'll be waiting for your engagement for our UEFA Champions League games that will be coming up next in a couple of days. Stay blessed. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and bye-bye for now.